Assalamu alaikum. Today we are here with a very special guest with a life journey that I think is absolutely amazing and worth celebrating. A journey from being student to a student artist, I should say, to an art educationist, to doing novel satirical pieces on TV, to stage acting, to studying the underprivileged parts of our society, to actively endorsing and writing books about female artists and raising their profile internationally, painting itself, of course, and being a passionate activist for women and children. Think about it for a minute. Is it possible for a woman, especially one that is living in our much to be desired Pakistani society, to do all this? Is it possible? And imagine doing this starting in the 60s. The answer is yes. The name is Saleema Hashmi, and she is an absolute asset of our country. We're very privileged to have her here with us today. So, Assalamu alaikum, Saleema. How are you?
Thank you. So far, so good. My throat is a little bit raw, but otherwise I'm fine.
Where we should start. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the first question that comes to my mind, right, when I see such a rich, complex life, when you reminisce about your life, what jumps out? Aapko, what would you like to share? Apni zindagi ke baare mein.
I was 80 at my last birthday, which was in December. So there's a lot of life there. And it's been very diverse. It's been very varied. I was lucky. I was privileged to be born into a family which was already diverse. My mother was British. My father's at that time Indian. I mean, I was 4 years old at partition. So, so it was a mixed marriage, two cultures coming together, but very definitely one culture was dominant, and that was my father's. Well, that's it, because very early on they decided that the children, I have a sister also, there shouldn't be any confusion. So my mother learned Urdu, she became a Muslim, she changed her dress. Until I was 5, I couldn't speak English. I didn't know any English.
Acha.
For an Angrez at that time was quite an achievement. But that was the only way my dadi would agree to the marriage. So they just waited until she said yes. Magar ye sharte hain. So my mother fulfilled all of those. And then finally the permission was given. And that's how they got married. I suppose a good moment is any to mention that my father was a poet. His name was Faiz Ahmad Faiz. So that in itself, of course, has colored my life. It's colored my life because of the kind of people that were always in the house, coming, going, journalists, writers, musicians, actors, all kinds of people, but also very, very political household, which is why he went to jail when I was 8.5 years old. And it's at that time editor of the Pakistan Times. So that was an age where you're very impressionable. And for 5 years, your father is not around. Of course, we would go to jail to meet him, which was, quite far away. But I always knew that I wanted to do something I was a terribly shy child, believe it or not. Wanted something very personal to myself. And that's how I started drawing and, eventually decided, okay, I'm going to do something to do with the visual arts. And then I was lucky enough to find great teachers, which always influences you greatly. So in Lahore, Shakir Ali, Aman Ghatas, and Professor Sponenberg, the first principal of NCA. I was among the first batches. We were only 4 girls at NCA when I was. Yes.
Look what happened. You grew to be the dean of the school there.
So, it's certainly come a long way since then. And so the things I have been involved with, which is art, but also activism, has colored my life. I took part in student demonstrations, both as a young student in Lahore, but also when I went to England to study. I took part in the peace demonstrations, the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. So art and life have been intertwined for me. Came back, got married, to a person I wanted to get married to. So that was unusual for its time also. Um, and went on to do pioneering work in television when we did satire, made people laugh while also making them think.
About
And I've
some
always,
subjects too.
yes, and I've been interested in children also. So I became a puppeteer very young age. Um, and then I started teaching, and I have been teaching ever since, which is a very long time. 30 years at NCA. I was a principal there also for 4 years. And then when in the private sector, the university started, which was a Beacon House National University, I was one of the founding deans of the Art and Design School. So briefly, that has been my career, which is there for everybody to see. But I was very passionately interested in women, women's development, and therefore in the Zia years, I teamed up with other women artists to firstly to write a manifesto for ourselves, because we could see that women were being marginalized. There was laws coming in that targeted women and minorities, of course, but especially women. And so I started my research for writing a book on women artists, and that was my first book. But because of all these years, I've been very, very keen on promoting young artists. And I was one of the people who joined in with two other people to start the Rohtas Gallery, first in Islamabad, then in Lahore. So my passion has been to make other people join my journey so that I'm not there alone. So when I think of how the numbers have grown, when I was a young teacher, Shakir Ali came into the studio when we were teaching, and we were about 10 students and maybe 3 teachers. And he looked around and he said, "You're so lucky." So I said, "Why, Shakir Sahab?" So he said, "You're lucky because you've got 8, 10 people that you can talk to." When I started teaching, there was practically nobody in my peers that I could talk to. Now, when I look around, 30, 40 years later, my God, we're like an army, we're like a tribe. From Bahawalpur to Pindi to Peshawar to Quetta, there are art departments, there are artists, there are designers, there are architects.
One point I remember you were banned from TV as well. Back
Yes.
when that was the Zia time, right?
11 long years. And they tried to bring us back because there was, quite a few people said that, they were such fun and so on. So we were persuaded to start a comedy which was called Balila, which was based on an old car. And we recorded 8 programs, only 3 of them ran. And then we were told that, the boss man himself, the president himself, stepped in and had it banned. So, yeah, we have that privilege. I must say, we wore that idea with like a band of courage, like a medal, that we were so dangerous that we had to be banned by the president himself, which is fine. We switched to street theater. We did a lot of satire. We were invited by all kinds of people to do satire. So we did a lot of satire based on some of the things that happened during Zia's period. And it's always important to laugh and make people laugh. So
and it's funny how, हर चीज जो आपको उस वक्त बुरी लग रही होती है, वो necessarily बुरी नहीं होती, because I read somewhere that wasn't that the beginning of you trying to go around the country filming with a camera, जब आप वो टीवी का जब वो tenure थोड़ी देर के लिए बंद हुआ.
Yes, that's
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. It was a time I didn't have a video camera. They were very unusual at that time. But I had got myself, a couple of really, really good cameras. So I decided to go out to discover Pakistan, that part of Pakistan, which I didn't know. So I started from the north. I was in Bannu, I was in Kohat, I was in, places like Parachinar, and working my way. And then you found me on the Manchar Lake, in Sindh, and I was in Moshki and in Balochistan. Basically, I was looking at the lives of women and children because by that time I decided, okay, I'm doing this for myself. And I was lucky that I got a commission from the women's division in Islamabad, and they said, okay, we'd like you to do an exhibition on women and children. So I focused more on children, and my father wrote a poem for it also, Mere Desh ke Naunihaalon ke Naam, which was supposed to be to accompany the exhibition. Except that my husband got arrested the day before the exhibition by Ziaul Haq, of course. So then the exhibition was cancelled, but I continued with the work.
What do you think? I mean, you have done a yeoman's amount of work. ठीक है, आपने बहुत काम किया है. Now, when you look at us, the next generation, and then when I look at my daughter, the next generation, आपके ख्याल में what is the onus or the responsibility that we have? Because हम सारे positions of privilege में भी हैं, positions of influence में भी हैं, some, everyone in their own different way, but we are privileged, right? The fact that I'm sitting in front of you and having this conversation, I'm privileged enough to be able to talk to somebody like you. आपके ख्याल में हमारी क्या responsibility है towards Pakistani women? Whether we live in Pakistan or overseas, what are some ways in which we can work towards women empowerment?
Well, I think the first step is to inform ourselves, because I'm not on social media except for WhatsApp. But even that sometimes depresses me when I hear people sending these messages about how Pakistani women are so privileged that their husbands can look after them, and the law gives them their right to property, etc., etc., etc. I mean, sort of all this kind of misinformation, I'll say, because people rarely stop to think what the life of the ordinary Pakistani woman is like. I think if you just simply think of the fact that, what the woman in the rural areas has to do in terms of the day's burdens. She wakes up first thing in the morning, she tends to all the cattle, if there is cattle. She is, of course, lighting the fire, fetching the water, taking that, and then if the man is working in the fields, then she will be taking the food there, but also then she's looking after the children. And then when it's harvest time, she's bringing in the crop as well. And the cotton crop is almost entirely harvested by women. They don't get the proceeds, but they do bring in the harvest. And that goes, across the board. Because of the very, very difficult circumstances, the economic circumstances, which have been there right from the beginning, but have become extremely acute, you find that women are working twice as hard as men. And I say that absolutely, having watched, observed, looking at the statistics, seeing what they have to undergo, whether it is the women who are working in the fisheries department, whether they're women who are working in health sector, whether they're women who are working, and that goes everybody from the polio workers to the women who are assisting in childbirth, to the women who are nurses, doctors, etc., etc. But if you simply look at what they have to contend with in areas where some of them are becoming more educated, and that is something that we are seeing. I'm talking because I was on a fact-finding mission for the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, of which I'm a council member, in Gilgit-Baltistan. And we're looking at the fact that more and more women are getting educated there. Firstly, because the Aga Khan, because there's a large Ismaili community, has specially told his community, if you have two children, one is son, one is a daughter, you educate the daughter in preference to the son. So, I mean, amazing sight in the morning, getting up and seeing the little girls like little ants going to school. I mean, they're crowding the streets and going. And you wonder, okay, so after this, what? Are they going to get the opportunity to turn it to economic benefit? Are they going to find partners who are equally well endowed with
at least literate, right? Even literacy is a privilege.
Yeah. So in those areas, the literacy generally is about 80%. And it's the same for women and men, which is quite extraordinary because it's not so in the rest of Pakistan. But then you come across this very difficult statistics, which is quite hard to deal with. the number of female suicides, for example. And we have brought that up over and over again. I wonder, and this is something that we ask these hard questions of the administration while you're there. How many of them are suicides and how many of them are honor killings? Because that happens also. And that happens across Pakistan. Sometimes what is called, a suicide is actually an honor killing. And this has been told to me by police women officers. So we are looking at a time in which circumstances are changing very quickly for women. But is society, is law, is governance realizing this?
No, well said.
So asking about our responsibility is to inform ourselves.
I want to ask you on another subject. जो आपकी जिंदगी के major influences थे. You mentioned professors earlier on in the conversation. What about family members? I mean, does your father stand out? Does your mother stand out? Other people that have shaped you and given you the values? And then what are those values that you're so proud of?
Well, obviously my parents in very different ways. And they were like chalk and cheese. My mother was this very forceful character with a quick temper. The things were black and white for her. And she was a real fighter for justice. She was a real fighter for the rights of women and children. She was one of the first women journalists in Pakistan. She was one of the founding members of the Business and Professional Women's Club. She was a founding member of Human Rights Commission, etc., etc., etc. And she was also a teacher, kindergarten teacher. So she did many things in her life. She stood by my father when he went to jail. So she went to work for us. In his final days, my father once said to me, very sweetly, मैं वो सब कुछ कर चुका क्योंकि मुझे पता था कि तुम्हारी माँ जो है तुम्हारा पेट पाल लेगी. So that was, an acknowledgement of the kind of partner she was. And for my father, of course, he was the strongest influence on me. Terribly gentle, never, ever, ever laid down the law, was so mild as to be utterly indulgent. And so much of the values that we have really came directly from him. A great believer in social justice and in peace, both within, as a person, but also peace with neighbors, peace in the world. And because he felt that humanism is the most basic value. And for humanism to develop means that there has to be peace. War and conflict is the enemy of humanism. So, and also a great believer in the future of women. So this is an instance which I always quote from my Aapka Bhi Kar Deti Hu. It was, the last time he came home, this was not very long before he passed away actually. So everybody was sitting in our house. It was Zia ka zamana tha. The Women's Action Forum ke bhi khawateen thi. There were some writers, there were some journalists, and chatting this, that, and the other, and things were depressing. I mean, those were tough days. So Munnu Bhai was sitting there and said, "Khair sahab, aapko koi umeed hai Pakistan ke liye? Koi umeed hai?" So he sort of, in his usual slow manner said, "Haan, mujhe Pakistani aurat se umeed hai." Oh. So of course, all the Women's Action Forum women all kind of perked up. So he said, Pakistani aurat se mujhe umeed hai. And then later on he said, because she's not in the rat race. And I mean, that he said in another context. And I was lucky that I have a husband, a partner, who, because he was a teacher also, and teacher in government college for 40 years. So Mesha kehte the, agar in his MA class, he used to say, if I admitted students on merit, there would not be a single boy in the MA class. All 50 of them were. He said, I have to take 1 or 2 token boys. Because, and often he said, the Pakistani woman is a superior species. बिल्कुल. और आप देखें तौर तरीके बदल रहे हैं, आसानी नहीं है। जितना मेरे ख्याल में जितना औरत आगे बढ़ती है उतने ही लोग उसको पीछे खींचने की कोशिश करते हैं। एंड अनफॉर्चुनेटली हमारी जो जुडिशियल सिस्टम है उसमें भी हम मर्द हजरात को अपने आप को काफी तालीम देने की जरूरत है। कभी आप जजमेंट्स आप जब पढ़ते हैं या उनके सुनते हैं, आप हैरान होते हैं कि भाई ये लोग वहां पे कैसे पहुंच गए बगैर अपने आप को इन्फॉर्म किए हुए कि भी असलियत क्या है जिंदगी की, जिंदगी कैसी है एक औरत की। तो आई थिंक दैट दे कैरी दैट पेट्रियार्की विद देम into the courts, and that goes for lawyers also. But I'm very happy when I see the hordes of women lawyers that are now practicing. कभी कभी उनको बहुत कीमत अदा करनी पड़ती है. There are famous cases of female lawyers being insulted, or female lawyers who even have had to suffer violence. लेकिन फिर हम देखते हैं कि भी वो लगी रहती हैं. इसीलिए people like Asma Jahangir are such a beacon in their lives. They did so much. एक दफा I was in Islamabad. A little anecdote I'll share with your listeners and viewers. तो मैं भी वापस आ रही थी लाहौर, वो भी आई थी. So she said, I'll give you a lift. You come to the Supreme Court and we'll drive back together. तो मैं पहुंची वहां पे, तो she was just coming out and smiling. तो मैंने कहा क्या हुआ, अच्छा गया केस? कहती हाँ, acquittal हो गया. तो मैंने कहा किसका था? तो कह ली इस औरत ने 10 साल गुजारे मुल्तान जेल में. She was accused of murder and she was sentenced. और हुआ ये था कि उसके मियाँ ने खुदकुशी की थी, लेकिन उसके मियाँ ने, लेकिन उसके खानदान wanted to collect the insurance or something like that. So they accused her of being the murderer. And accused her कि फलां के साथ इसकी कोई affair था, ये वो. And she said, कि भाई ये सारी उम्र इसको, she was sentenced to for life imprisonment. और कहने लगी कि केस हमारे सामने आया, हमने हम लड़े उससे, क्योंकि एंड फाइनली सुप्रीम कोर्ट में जब पहुंची अपील तो शी वाज एक्विटेड. 10 साल गुजर गए थे, उसके बच्चे बड़े हो गए थे. This innocent woman has spent 10 years in jail. Okay.
Unbelievable.
तो मैंने कहा कि अच्छा तो फिर इस केस के पैसे तो मैं कितने मिले? तो कह लिए 1500 रुपए. The thing is, these are cases that people take pro bono. There are not many of them. लेकिन we know कि हमारा judicial system ऐसा है कि there are hundreds if not thousands of innocent people who spend years behind bars. एक तो the judicial system is slow. और फिर so many innocent people are there. And women.
Interesting कि जब आप इंडिविजुअल लोगों के किस्से सुनते हैं, इतने लोग हैं जो अपने टाइम पे एफर्ट करते हैं. दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ goodwill that exists at the civilian level, somehow वो national level पे अगर translate हो जाए, तो what a powerful society we could become.
Yeah.
I don't know where that breaks down, but somewhere it breaks down. Because there are too many examples of too many good people doing this type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, obviously the answer is because the institutions are weak. Whether it is parliament or whether it is the judiciary or whether it is the executive, all these three pillars are not doing their job the way that they should. They are not well informed. They are highly patriarchal.
Yeah.
Even though जो 2-3 reports अभी हाल में मिली हैं of the performance of women legislators, they're far superior to the performance of male legislators. If they attend the assembly, they go there, they are actually voting, they're actually proposing bills, all parties. This is not particular to one party. So they are better at their job, And so I think more and more they should actually be standing for election, because these are often nominated by their own parties. ना बहुत कम है औरतें जो कि जनरल एक सीट के ऊपर करती, बाकी तो they come on the quota. लेकिन when they come on the quota वो फिर भी बेहतर perform करती हैं in parliament. So that is something to be thinking about. I am happy to say that now we have a female judge in the Supreme Court also. I hope there'll be many, many, many more. I'm sure there'll be a lot better than, than the ones that I don't know whether I'm committing contempt of court or not, but I'm sure women judges will do far better than their male colleagues.
So Saleema, as I listen to you, the theme that I'm getting is struggle, right? Struggle, zindagi mein khud bhi aur logon ko bhi message dein कि you have to fight for the causes that are important, right? So to embrace that, what do you think is your king attitude that you must have to be able to have that mindset?
You know, मुझे नहीं मालूम कि ये चीज सीखी जा सकती है कि नहीं. You know, या ये होती है कि ये आपकी तालीम में जिस तरह से आप आपका बचपन गुजरता है, आप आसपास देखते हो कि भी लोगों की जिंदगियां कैसी हैं, ये तो फिर आपको एहसास होता है कि भाई they say there but for the grace of God go I. आप सोचते हो कि अगर मैं इतनी खुशकिस्मत हूँ तो then there has to be payback. और ये जो अवेयरनेस होती है ये मेरे ख्याल में कि बहुत पहले होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि if you look at our textbooks, I don't have much hair, but I want to pull out my hair when I read the textbooks. They are so awful. That's all I can say. क्योंकि वो pontificate करते हैं ना, वो जो नसीहत होती है किताब में, बच्चे वैसे नहीं सीखते. There has to be in a very playful manner. You have to let children imbibe real values. जब आप हथौड़ा लेके तो बच्चों को नसीहत करते हैं, they don't get it. और कोई natural resilience पैदा हो जाती है कि अगर कोई बड़ा आपको कोई इतनी जोरदार तरीके से कुछ कह रहा है तो फिर you have to rebel. और किताबें भी वैसी हैं, unfortunately. And they weren't always like that. The textbooks that I had as a child, they were much more attuned to children. और अब तो मेरे ख्याल में कोई काफी बदमिजाज 70 साल के, मैं खुद से 80 साल की हूँ, 70 साल बदमिजाज मर्द जो हैं वो ये किताबें लिखते हैं और उनको बिल्कुल नहीं पता कि बच्चे कैसे सीखते हैं. एंड स्पेशली उर्दू की किताबें तो बहुत ही बुरी हैं, इतनी बुरी लिखी गई कि बच्चे जो हैं वो दूर भागते हैं. Same with social studies. I mean, they're so badly written. They're so badly written. और मैं अब क्यों ना, चूंकि you've given me the opportunity, I'm a great opponent of the single national curriculum because मेरे ख्याल में उसका premise ही गलत है. देखिए, आपको अपने education is a provincial subject. It's not a federal subject. आपको अपनी ज़बान में पहले पढ़ना चाहिए. कोई भी आपकी पश्तो है, पंजाबी है, सिंधी है, जो भी उर्दू है, whatever. And then when you're 4, 6, 7, 8 years old, then you can start a second language. You can have a second language right from the beginning. लेकिन ये है कि आपकी जो माँ बोली है वो आपकी होनी चाहिए स्कूल में. And this is an established fact of education that you learn faster and better if you're doing it in your own language. And especially if it's a teacher's own language also. Because apart from, of course, elite schools, majority of children go to government schools or they go to those private schools that are corner schools, जो मोहल्ले में होते हैं. तो वहाँ पे मेरे ख्याल में कि खराब अंग्रेजी में पढ़ाने के बजाय अगर आप माँ बोली में पढ़ाएं तो the kids will learn faster and it will be, they'll want to go to school. तो ये भी है कि बच्चे स्कूल जाना भी नहीं चाहते. So we have 23 million kids out of school, which is not good for the state of Pakistan.
So outside of the mother tongue issue, which I think is very legitimate, do you have any other concerns with the single national curriculum?
Yes. It doesn't in any way accommodate the minorities.
Achha.
Anyway, which I think is an criminal oversight. Absolute criminal oversight. It's like you're pretending that they don't exist, okay? And that is certainly not what the white part of the flag stands for, the national flag stands for. ये heavy-handedness attitude to the minorities, it just shows that you're uncivilized. That's all I can say. पहली बात. दूसरी बात ये है कि वो उसके बीच में जिस तरह से a particular kind of religious thinking is being pushed is not a great idea. क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल में उसमें आपको खास किस्म की नैरो वैल्यूज जो हैं वो they projected. The English textbooks in the single national curriculum are hilarious because वो ऐसे लोगों ने लिखी हैं जिनकी अंग्रेजी खासी कमजोर है. उसमें बड़ी अच्छी क्रिटिक्स हैं. डॉक्टर अंजुम अल्ताफ साहब हैं, उन्होंने हर टेक्स्ट बुक और हर एरिया के ऊपर बहुत अच्छा, बहुत तफसील से क्रिटिक किया है. And which, so it's not all hearsay. You read that and you just say, my goodness, this was done in such great haste and so poorly executed just to put a one idea into place, and it's very counterproductive. और मेरे ख्याल में कि कॉग्निशन जो होती है बच्चे की, कॉग्निटिव डेवलपमेंट जो होती है, वो कहीं दूर से नहीं गुजरी प्लानर्स के. They don't understand how children learn. Because my higher degree is actually in art education. So, how people learn through art, or how art can teach you so much. Visual learning is very important for children. Children learn through pictures much faster. तो ये सारी चीजें हैं जो कि अगर आपने करिकुलम रिवैम्प करना था तो जरा थोड़ा सा 21वीं सदी का नोटिस तो ले लेते कि भाई सदी बदल गई है, प्लीज, So it's like they've thought that they were doing it for 19th century kids. It's not working.
Good, all good points. Last couple of things. I remember reading somewhere that you like to think, even as a child, you spend a lot of time just thinking. Is that contemplation, or is it like, what do you think about or thought about? Are there any particular things that you want to bring up?
Just daydreaming.
Daydreaming, good old daydreaming. Okay.
Good old daydreaming, and
good for everybody.
Something that is continued. I'm a great daydreamer. And it's been helpful in the dark times because, of course, it keeps you going, when things don't look so good. But it also makes you tremendously optimist, of course, because, your dreams you make up yourself. So you're not going to make up nightmares, not at all. You're going to make up things that are going to make life better. And that's something that I'm one of those incurable optimists. I always think कि भाई नहीं कोई बात नहीं, आज रात सो जाओ, सुबह बेहतर होगा. तो मेरे ख्याल में that is also inherited from my father. My mother was much more of a pessimist. उनका ख्याल होता था कि बस अभी आसमान फटेगा और नीचे से कुछ तूफान आ जाएगा. But my father used to always say, नहीं ठीक है. And especially when there was not much money around, so my mother used to say, good passage. So my father used to just smile and say, Allah dega. And she used to say, oh my God, So, but very sanguine. And
no, but this optimism is a very powerful attitude, right? Jo zindagi aapne guzari hai, if that was the baseline, trusting you forward, then that's a very, very powerful baseline to have.
I think it's in current times, it's terribly important to have that. Otherwise, you feel yourself sinking. My father, in one of his jail letters to my mother, wrote a rather sweet thing. He wrote that, I'm just sort of quoting from memory, that, pain and unhappiness are two very different things. Pain you can't avoid because it is something that can happen. His brother had died because he came to visit him in Hyderabad jail, and he died of a heart attack just the morning that he was supposed to see him. So he was in that, there are things that you can't avoid, like the death of a brother. But unhappiness you can do something about, because if you let the pain take you over, it can grow like a canker. But if you feel that there's something to work for in life, or that then you don't allow that unhappiness to take you over. So making this distinction between pain, which is an external thing, but unhappiness, which you can control, which is an internal thing, that you should think that there's things larger than important things to work for, so your unhappiness will recede. So this distinction he made between pain and unhappiness, very often it has seen me through difficult and painful times.
Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I think that today, more than ever, poetry becomes relevant. क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल में कि जब आपको और कुछ ना समझ आए तो फिर अदब, शायरी, मौसीकी, अच्छी तस्वीर, उन पे गौर किया जाए तो बहुत अच्छी बात है. Because I think from there you get the values that are universal values, and those values don't change. ये मैं इसलिए कहती हूँ क्योंकि लोग कभी-कभी जज्बात में आके वक्ती फायदा देखते हैं और मेरे ख्याल में कि वो अपने आप से जरा बेईमानी होती है. तो इसलिए मैं I always, when I'm uncertain, I look to certain things that are there in our culture, in our tradition, even in things that are happening today, which are true, which are about truth, and not about favors, not about the mirage of change, but things that we need to look at hard. For me, that comes from seeing, from worrying about people's lives. So, इस वक्त मेरे ख्याल में सबसे बड़ा मसला है और होगा पाकिस्तान में, वो भूख है. People are going to be hungry, and food security is under severe threat, and that should be paramount in everybody's mind. Mm-hmm. So, keeping that in view, बाकी चीजें फिर एक तरफ, और ये सोचना कि इस वक्त कितने लोग जो हैं वो महरूम हैं, वो सोचना बहुत 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 जरूरी है. But I don't want to leave it on a sad note. If you allow me, can I read a poem that I love?
Oh, please, I would love that. Our viewers love that.
वो ये मेरी बहुत favorite poem है, my father's. और वो इसलिए because I told him that this is a painter's poem. So he thought a little bit and he said, हाँ, शायद. It's a poem which is called Sham.
Okay.
और it goes like this. इस तरह है कि हर एक पेड़ कोई मंदिर है, कोई उजड़ा हुआ बेनूर पुराना मंदिर, ढूंढता है जो खराबी के बहाने कब से, चाक हर बाम हर एक दर कदमे आखिर है, आसमां कोई परोहत है जो हर बाम तले, जिस्म पे राख मले, माथे पे सिंदूर मले, सरनगू बैठा है चुपचाप न जाने कब से. इस तरह है कि बसे पर्दा कोई साहिर है, मैजिशियन, जिसने आफाक पे फैलाया है यूं सहर का दाम, दामने वक्त से पैवस्त है यूं दामने शाम. अब कभी शाम बुझेगी ना अंधेरा होगा, अब कभी रात ढलेगी ना सवेरा होगा. आसमां आस लिए है कि ये जादू टूटे, चुप की जंजीर कटे, वक्त का दामन छूटे, दे कोई सख दुहाई, कोई पायल बाजे, कोई बुत जागे, कोई सांवली घूंघट खोले.